Welcome to day 3 of Good Day Bio Live, coming to you from the 2022 Bio International Convention in San Diego, California. I'm Tetiana Anderson. This week is about a return to togetherness so we can solve the challenges of today and the future. It's thanks in part to the delivery of 12 billion vaccines worldwide. Now, thousands of innovators, experts in immunology, biotech business leaders, federal officials, young bio-geniuses right here on Earth, and astronauts in outer space are digging in. NASA astronaut Kjell Lindgren is docked at the International Space Station doing experiments on the effects of microgravity.
I just would encourage those of you who are at the conference today to think about how this orbital laboratory, how the weightless environment could serve as an inspiration or a great environment for your field of research.
As private space travel ramps up, companies are increasingly conducting research in orbit in order to launch product development on Earth. And speaking of Earth, experts are anticipating the next pandemic. Some say it's not a matter of if, but when. I spoke with John Trezino of Novavax about how prepared he is for what might be next and how he felt when he realized his company had a vaccine that could combat COVID-19. When did you first realize you had a vaccine that would work against COVID, and how did you feel when you heard that?
Well, we had signals that we were going to have a good vaccine for COVID. We had experience already with a coronavirus for SARS and MERS, several years before. A combination with our technology platform, our recombinant protein nanoparticle. So we took that to our discovery team, and we knew that we had the foundational elements for that to be a success, and certainly didn't know for sure until we started our phase 1/2 trial in Australia.
How big a role do public-private partnerships play in developing these vaccines, whether it's COVID or something else?
Oh, for us, it was a significant benefit. We received early money from a CEPI organization called CEPI. They were there from the very beginning, funding that phase 1/2 trial, making sure that we had manufacturing scale-up work being done. And then, of course, later on from the U.S. government, some initially $1.6 billion. And so all that allowed us to develop at a significant pace and to do things in parallel and take, development risk and clinical risk by running those activities in parallel that normally would take 6 to 8 years. And therefore, we were able to accelerate all this work and do it in a period of, 1 to 2 years.
So speaking about acceleration, we've heard talk about developing the next vaccine for the next pandemic in about 100 days. How possible do you think that is?
I think it's extraordinarily possible. The reason for that is we knew we had a vaccine that went into a phase, 1/2 trial. Now, what needs to, I always like to say that good ideas are only as good as their execution. So 100 days is a great idea, but you have to be prepared for that, right? You have to have manufacturing support, you have to have regulatory support, you have to have some prior experience with some of these emerging infectious diseases. But if those elements are in place, then certainly that's possible.
To vax or not to vax? That's a question for Phyllis Arthur. She's an infectious disease expert for Bio. With hesitancy in some communities around COVID and other vaccines, I asked her about tech innovations that could change the way some people think about getting immunized. So what kind of vaccine innovations have struck you most? What are you paying attention to?
I'm actually really excited about many of the technologies that came out of COVID. So obviously we've all talked about mRNA. Very unique technology, been in development for a little over a decade, and really has revolutionized the ability to develop vaccines for multiple different viruses very quickly. In addition, it actually is applicable to building therapies. Otherwise, there's other technologies that were older that are actually getting a reinfusion, like protein, recombinant technologies, these things we've used for vaccines in the past, but now they become more exciting and more interesting. So there's a lot happening that could lead to great vaccines in the future.
What's your advice to people who may still be hesitant?
I think the thing I've been saying to people for the last couple of years is ask the questions. And to a provider, it's okay for someone to have questions. Like, we shouldn't be defensive as vaccine advocates for someone having a perfectly legitimate question about why they should get something or why a family member should. Instead, we should listen and understand what's underneath the subtext of why someone's concerned. Is it that they had an adverse event, or they knew a family member, or is it that they think they're not at risk? Is it that they think that something's being done to them that's not fair in the healthcare system? Understanding that actually gets people to yes. And I think it's the same thing we apply to any other convincing we need to do on something.
McKinsey and Company showcased their latest research on venture investment trends in technology. Senior partner Olivier Leclerc says that while the market represents challenges right now, it also presents opportunities for companies with innovative science.
This is a difficult market and a difficult environment. Of course, funding has pretty much dried up for many biotech companies. This being said, we see two things. One is many biotechs were savvy enough to raise money in the right time. And so if you look at biotech at the end of 2021, for those who had IPO'd, about 40% of them had about $250 million in cash or more. So they have actually some runway to go through that cycle. Ultimately, science matters. I see some very small companies that actually still get funded because they have exciting science, they have an exciting team. And you see some deals happening, actually some big pharma actually buying or partnering with small companies today. So I would say, yes, it's a tough environment. It's actually a challenging environment, but essentially the people who actually are getting funding right now are probably actually very, very promising, and ultimately they have promising science.
Bio and the global nonprofit Autumn released a report that details the economic contributions of university and nonprofit inventions. The report found the licensing of academic patents contributed up to $1.9 trillion to the U.S. economy and supported 6.5 million jobs in the last 25 years. This whole week has been about partnerships. I spoke with Bio's Pete Pellerito about what it takes to strengthen the biotech workforce.
Talent is incredibly important for our industry of the future. It is the people that will make the difference in making products, doing research, and providing opportunities in the workplace for a variety of audiences. Public-private partnerships to support our industry are incredibly important. And for us to be successful in the future, we need to strengthen those partnerships, both on a public sector and a private sector environment.
And Bio's Mackenzie Vernetti says industry partnerships are important too.
These partnering meetings really bring about the collaboration and innovation that is necessary to bring medicines and cures to patients. They're a path to partnership, whether that's securing a licensing deal for a drug or funding for a brand new compound, or even introducing a new biotech to the next great manufacturer. It's really all about bringing cures and relief to patients faster. So we already have over 44,000 meetings scheduled, and that number is growing by the hour, but we're having more and more meetings out here on the floor as well. I'm seeing business cards being traded on the fly very often.
And a cautionary note to all you adult geniuses out there, your future competition is here. Okezaway Bell, a 16-year-old from Pennsylvania, is officially on his way to a stellar career in biotech. He won the $7,500 Bio Genius Award. I caught up with him post-victory. He told me about his plans for the future and about his current work developing a new kind of prosthetic for amputees.
It's a pleasure to be here this morning in person to announce the grand prize winner of the 2022 International BioGenius Challenge.
So what my project I did was I designed and developed a low-cost and robust prosthetic arm for individuals with below-the-elbow amputations called transradial amputations. And despite them actually being a small portion of the amputee population, transradial amputations are sort of like a difficult slope to kind of overcome for biotechnicians because of the fact that the hand is so complex. And so what I did was I sought to investigate kind of why prosthetics today aren't achieving adequate functionality and why they're so expensive, and then develop a low-cost prosthetic that could achieve really high functionality with minimal amount of materials.
Our overall grand prize winner is Okezaway Bell. Come on down.
So how did you even think to do this? I mean, what was your inspiration behind this project?
Yeah, so both my parents are engineers and I've always been really interested in bio. So I had the lucky experience of kind of being surrounded by technology, but then I was an organization volunteer for Billion Strong, which is this global disability organization. And through there, as like this kind of youth mentor, I get to speak to a lot of individuals with disabilities. And so I was on a Zoom call with a rehabilitation hospital, and I met an amputee who had kind of fallen off of his motorcycle and gotten gangrene. And so because of that infection, his arm had to be cut off. And so he talked about how $15,000 later and 3 months of rehabilitation later, he received a prosthetic and that it was painful and difficult to use. And so I thought, with the wealth of technology we have available to us today, why not create a solution?
That's so amazing. Where are you hoping all of this takes you? I mean, do you see a future for yourself in the biotech industry?
Yeah, I definitely hope so. I hope to kind of major in something biotech related. So perhaps a mixture of biomechanical engineering and computer science. So I'll have that research aspect, and then perhaps like a minor in policy. It's a very ambitious kind of college experience, but I hope to really mix this science and technology that I'm so interested in.
Before we get to what we're watching today, we'll leave you with some highlights from the Bio Unbound speaker series on Tuesday.
This morning's speakers are disruptive thinkers. They're doers with audacious ideas that I think will change the way you look at human mortality, global security, and science as a force for good and for social change.
We certainly don't know whether death's inevitable, and it likely is, but the linkage between chronological age and health is certainly empirically malleable. We should be doing more to preserve function in the portion of our population that suffers the most from ill health. A dichotomy only made them more clear during the past 2 years. The last 50 years of your life can be the first 50 years of the next phase of your career, a world of limitless potential.
In Valerie Hudson's Sex and World Peace, she highlights that the most significant predictive factor of state stability is not GDP or military strength, but rather the status and rights of women. So the exclusion of women from decision-making creates greater insecurity for all of us. And restricting women's reproductive rights impacts health, limits economic mobility, erodes trust in government, and makes women less inclined or able to take on positions of leadership.
Tell me about your new book.
We need to start demanding immediate benefit all over the globe. And that's what the book is about. It's taking the stories of so many bio-member companies and showing how their technologies, properly harnessed and distributed, can be a fuel for justice. And we call it just science. So I hope that this humbling moment we're facing as a globe makes more people turn to the promise of science to get us up off of our knees.
On the convention schedule today, we'll hear from four-time Olympic gold medalist Venus Williams. Emmy-nominated sports reporter Erin Andrews will talk to her about a health journey that changed the tennis star's life. The Vital Transformation session is set to look at bringing new therapies for unmet health needs to the market. There's a discussion on the silent pandemic of antimicrobial resistance and a conversation on the role of regulatory policies in driving drug development. And be sure not to miss the closing reception. It's aboard the USS Midway starting at 7 p.m. tonight. Remember, you can get all the convention's highlights in Good Day Bio on Bio.News and right here with me on the next episode of Good Day Bio Live. It airs at 7 a.m. Pacific. And if you're not already getting Good Day Bio in your inbox, visit bio.org or bio.news for all the top stories. And if you're posting on social media, don't forget to use the hashtag Bio2022. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.